أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Distinguished and honorable ulama, students of knowledge, huffaz of the Book of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, and honored brothers and sisters in Islam. All of us find ourselves in times that seem to resemble more and more what the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam described the end days would look like. One of the attributes or adjectives that describes that time is that even the person who is of sound constitution will be hayran, be speechless, and will not know what to do or what to say when confronted with the bizarre happenings and absurdities of that era. So here we are, talking about those things that really didn't need to be talked about. But alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala gave everybody their challenges. And we are where we are. There's no need to be upset about it. By faking and acting like we're somewhere that we're not going to benefit ourselves. But by accepting what our issues are, what our challenges are, what our shortcomings are, we can do something to address them, and then we can make progress afterward. In fact, oftentimes these shortcomings and challenges are a blessing. I remember when I was on the plane to Mauritania the first time. There was once a Shaykh who was on the flight. I could tell this man is a man of ilm, just by looking at him. So I struck up a conversation with him. I moved from one seat to the other. Mauritania being a pastoralist society, they're not super strict about seat numbers on the flight. At least they weren't back then. And he told me something from advice for a student of knowledge. One of the pieces of advice he gave is if you're put into some sort of remedial situation where something that seems really easy for other people is hard for you, and you have to learn it again and again, read it again and again, because amongst them, they read one book by one book, and if you don't understand the book, you don't get to the next one. So you may end up reading the same book several times. And there was this idea amongst them. This is also nasiha for my fellow teachers who teach books to people, to students of knowledge, that they actually used to consider it a sign of a person's lack of ikhlas and their impiety that they would teach smart people, but they wouldn't teach stupid people. I wish I could say there's no one in the world who's stupid, but sadly, the Sharia obliges us to also be honest. But what he did say, he said that if you don't understand something and you have to read it again and again and again, sometimes there's great khair in it. So he gave the example of one of the great qurra of the Quran. Nowadays, what we consider a qari is somebody who can give an operatic performance of a couple of ayahs that they really rehearsed really good, and then God knows if they can read it straight the next day. Over there, the qari is the one who first reads or memorizes the riwayah of Warsh, then Qalun, then memorizes the rasam, the way the Quran is written. You'll see that, right? Look at the... It's nice that this poster is here, but the actual calligraphy in the mihrab is actually much more beautiful than that, right? Right? إذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان. The ya is not written for da'i, it's da' with a kasra, and then there's a tashkil in some of the qira'at for the full ya, and some of them it's just carried by kasra. The spelling of words is a little bit different in the Quran than it is in normal Arabic. So you have to memorize that as well. Once you can memorize that, all three of those things, then you're considered to be a hafiz. And so he mentioned that somebody once sat for the exam of the rasam to write out the way the Quran is written. And he did everything perfectly, and he made a mistake somewhere in Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la. And so the mashayikh made them go back and relearn the rasam all from the beginning again. And it's frustrating. It's difficult and everybody else did it right the first time. And imagine a person of all the places to make a mistake, like Juz Amma is not like a place that a person's going to make the mistake out of incompetence. It's just your mind went here or there or whatever, and so you had to do it again. But then they say that that man, until his old age, he was the one that was the person to learn from, because he had to go through it again, so he really mastered it. This is one of the absurdities of the nafs, that we think that somehow you're going to talk about Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab so much that one day you'll become like him. You're not going to become like him. It doesn't work that way. Some people think we're going to talk about the sunnah so much and you're going to somehow be following all of the sunnah. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You can pray as many sunnahs as you want to. Before Isha, the right number. After Isha, the right number. You can put your ring on the correct finger. Your dadi can be 100% award-winning, level 7 compliant. Your pants can be above your ankle. Every single thing you use, like, I got this. I'm doing this. The sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My chadar is the right color. My this, that. Everything is set up. And then your mother says something and the whole thing comes crashing down. Your wife says something, the whole thing comes crashing down. You come back to reality and you realize it's not as easy as you first thought. Now, if another man were to say this thing about the dadi or about the shalwar or whatever, many people say these types of off comments because they're haters. They don't respect these things. Look at me. Are my pants below my ankle? Bhai Abdullah, did I take my socks off and make wudu, or did I wipe over my socks? When I made wudu, did I take them off? I took them off, right? I washed my feet. My dadi is actually quite award-winning, mashallah. My beard is more than a fist length, see? Not just from here, even from the sides, you see? See that? I'm not a hater. These things are sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and because of that, they're all important. Anyone who dismisses their importance, that person has really lost a greater portion of their iman than they would think. But that doesn't mean these are the most important things. They're important, and there are other things that are more important than that. The usuli methodology, which was taught by the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Usuli means what? Principled methodology. That was taught by the Prophet ﷺ to the companions, and by the companions to the great imams of the aslaf, that are transmitted through the 4 madhabs and through the science of hadith, tafsir, fiqh, all of these things, tasawwuf. All of them teach us that you have to build things in order. If your salat is like 100% amazing, but you didn't make wudu, then what do you have? You have nothing. So, like I mentioned, for those of you who were there in the Jum'ah bayan in Pickering, the mashayikh say that in order to be a alim, a good alim, you have to first be at least a functional Muslim. Otherwise, your ilm is worthless. What's the point of leading the best Tarawih in town if you didn't even pray Isha, right? No point at all. There's no reward in the Tarawih either. That's what the fuqaha, there's no reward in the Tarawih. There's not a little bit, there's literally none. In order to be an alim, you need to first be a functional Muslim. In order to be a good Muslim, you have to at least be a functional human being. And now we've come to the point that Jame Masjid Abu Bakr, Scarborough, has paid for my ticket to come here and tell you this one other piece of the puzzle, which seems to require reminding, which is, in order to be a good human being, you have to first be a functional animal. A what? A functional animal. You're not a plant, are you? Are you a fungus, my friend? A bacteria? A virus? You have to first be a functional animal. We've completely 100% forgot this. Part of that is knowing what the difference between a man and a woman is, what a difference between a male and a female is, right? Being a man, that's a very distant topic. We're not going to get to that right now. Oftentimes when somebody talks about being a man, this is what min al-mu'minina, you can correct me, I'm not a hafiz, a miskin like fake Molvi, right? Min al-mu'minina rijalun sadaqu ma ahadullah alayhi فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من انتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. Say, is it right? ومنهم من ينتظر ومن قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. That from the believers there are such men that have fulfilled their covenant with the Lord, what the covenant that they took with Allah. And from amongst them, their wafa, their fulfillment of this covenant was so complete that they gave their life for it. And there are some amongst them that the difference between them is they're just as good as that good group, but they're just waiting for their turn to give their life for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. And in the meanwhile, وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They didn't change at all. The same amount of sincerity, the same amount of excitement, the same amount of love, the same amount of patience, the same amount of all of these virtuous traits, they keep until it's time to go. They don't flake out in the middle. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. This is a trait of being a man, is the ability to weather the storm and be who you are. Now, oftentimes in majalis like this, when people talk about manhood, they'll say that every male is not a man, which is true. There are many people who are biologically male, they're genetically male, they're physiologically male, they look like a male, they smell like a male. But they don't embody the qualities of manhood. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm talking about what does it mean to be a male, because people have forgotten that as well. I myself, actually, to be honest with you, Hafiz Nadim, when I was talking to him about the bayan and the topic, I was under the impression that this would be only a talk that's given to the brothers. Because we as men have some things we need to work out amongst ourselves. We need to have our own space to discuss certain things. And in order to facilitate discussion, it's better that we do it amongst ourselves. Inshallah, we can have that gathering as well. Since the sisters are here, I'm going to have to moderate and shift around some of these things. But all I have to say is, sisters, your bayan is a different one. You should hear that as well. So don't use this in order to browbeat your husband or your brother or your father or your sons, and use it to get one up on them. But use it as something to understand what it is that you have to help them and facilitate them with. Because we support one another. Right? We support one another. لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. It doesn't, that Allah Ta'ala made a mate from amongst you, made for you a mate from yourself, so that you can be at peace and tranquility with her. Not so that you can jump into the octagon and, duke it out. That's not a marriage, that's Jahannam. تقول هل امتلأتي وتقول يقول لجهنم هل امتلأتي وتقول هل من مزيد. That's not good. That's not good. And that's again a complete product of the dysfunctionality between men not knowing how to be men and women not knowing how to be women. And now, how can you know how to be a man if you don't know how to be a male? So certain small biology lesson, okay? Molvi biology lesson. If you read the Hujjatullah al-Baligha Shawaliullah, it's not like in the medical school nisab, is it? It's not, right? Something you'd read to be you read that book and then you become serious Molvi. Once you quote that in your bayan, people, their ears perk up and say, this guy, he even read that? Okay, we read some parts of it. Shah Waliullah observed things about the natural world around him, and he observed how those things, in light of them, the Sharia actually makes a lot of sense. In a universal way. In a way that's not only limited to Fridays or limited to the spiritual world or limited to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or whatever. But that's universal. So he noted this one thing, that amongst all the mammals, right? You're a mammal or are you a reptile? You're a mammal, right? My kids, I swear to God, they really resisted this for a very long time when I told them they're animals. So I'm not an animal. And then they went to high school biology and their kafir teacher told them, and then they accepted it. Right? You're warm-blooded. Mothers nurse their children with milk, right? It's not like a bird that you eat the food and regurgitate it into its mouth. You're a mammal. Amongst mammals, the normal method of procreation is what? Females are guaranteed to pass on their genetic material to the next generation unless there's some sort of extremely severe deformity or problem with them. In general, every female will have a child. It's not difficult. And with human beings, it's actually the same thing. Obviously, none of you are like this, but if you were to try to go and solicit a mate, as a woman, it would be much easier to find a mate than as a man. This is a biological reality. We're not talking about Islam yet. We're not talking about manly, chivalrous character. We're just talking about being a male and being a female. Being a male is different though. Shah Waliullah noted that amongst mammals, what ends up happening is all the males get together and they fight it out, they duke it out. And the one that can beat up all the other ones, we refer to in biology as the alpha male. As the what? As the alpha male. Is the strongest male always the alpha? No. Sometimes you win by cunning, sometimes you win by alliances. I'm talking about animals here right now. Go watch nature documentaries. It's really interesting. Watch nature documentaries. Like the alpha gorilla is not necessarily the youngest and strongest one, but he's the one who knows how to make friends with the other gorillas so that he can fight one at a time, and he's good at dealing with the other gorillas, knows who to make friends with, know that if he becomes alpha, who to do what for, and etc. He makes his thing, and then when a challenger comes, then he smashes him down. So it's a combination of a bunch of things, right? We need to learn from the animals, right? We need to learn from the animals. You cannot be alpha on your own, but that's a separate discussion for a separate time because we have a limited amount of time. Hafsab, when does this thing supposed to end again? Okay. We'll try to give you 5 minutes more than that earlier, okay? So they all basically get together. The alpha beats down all the rest of them, and then they show deference. The betas that are beaten, they show deference to the alpha, and then the alpha alone goes to they literally call it the harem, the harem, to all the females and mates with all of them, and that's how the next generation of gorillas or seals or whatever other normal mammal gets generated. What's the wisdom in all of this? The wisdom is that with like a stock portfolio, right? Females are like bonds, right? They're not Sharia compliant, I know, okay? But they're like bonds, low risk, low return. Low risk, low return. Everyone mates, everyone puts their genetic material forward. With males, it's high risk, high return, meaning not every male is going to mate. But through this duking it out process, fighting it out process, what ends up happening is that whatever substandard genetic material there are, whatever mutations there are, whatever slow individuals there are, they're not going to pass on their genetic material. Only the top class will pass on its genetic material to the next generation so as to keep the gene pool fresh and clean. And it's actually quite successful. It's actually quite successful in life. This is why mammals are not the only ones that have male and female gender. Rather, it's something that's pervasive throughout the entire like ambit of like living things. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. It works. Shah Waliullah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions this, that human beings, like an eagle flies in the air and like a fish swims in the sea and like moles burrow underground, beavers build a dam, right? Canada, right? Beavers, they build the dam. So the thing that people do is what? Civilization. Otherwise, many animals are much stronger than us and have a lot more robust physical capacities than we do. In fact, this is a dalil that human beings are different than the other animals because we have no normal ecosystem that we can live in like an animal. Too much cold, we die. Too much heat, we die. Too much exposure, we die. So many things we need just to stay alive. It's because we're not from here. Our ecosystem is in a different place. It's in Jannah, right? So Shah Waliullah noted, he said what? He said that human beings, because they need civilization, and that's their niche that they have amongst living things, that allows them to survive and thrive and actually be very successful. Civilization requires collaboration. So let's just say, okay, lock all the doors. That's it. We're going to duke it out, alpha male in the masjid. Okay? All of us, alpha male in the masjid, we're just gonna go at it one after the other, after the other, after the other. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with that? Other than you guys are gonna lose. What's the problem with that? This guy might win. The problem with that is that civilization requires collaboration. Guerrilla civilization is not a civilization at all. It doesn't require any collaboration. You just walk up into the tree, you eat a bunch of insects, you eat some leaves, you every now and then eat this and that, and you're done. It's all provided for you and it's done. There's no civilization required. Some collaboration, of course, occurs, but it's very low level compared to what our needs are. Could you build a building like this alone? Is there anybody who's going to master all of the skills needed in order to make the carpets, make the walls, to design the chandelier, to do the load calculations, to see which beam should go where, to design all the materials, to mine them from all these different places, bring them together? It's 100% impossible. Things like this that we take for granted are the fruit of centuries of knowledge that has been gathered, preserved, and refined. And what's even more interesting than that, a lot of the things we take for granted are not even things human beings figured out. They're from the human race's collective memory of living in Jannah. Like language that we have, it's not from this world. If you think somehow or another there's a monkey that was sitting around going, and then one day, people are like, وَلَسْتُ بِنَحْوِيٍّ يَلُوكُ لِسَانُهُ وَلَكِنِّي صَلِيقِيٌّ أَقُولُ فَأُعْرِبُ. If you think that happened randomly, you're a fool. Things like that don't happen randomly. But at any rate, this collaboration, we need it for civilization to occur. So for that reason, the Sharia actually puts a limit on how many mates an alpha male can take, which is, right? Puts a limit on it. Otherwise, if one person had like $10 billion, I swear, we would all be sunk. We would be the betas, we would live in a colony on the side and just like bide out our time, and that would be it. But no one would collaborate with one another because we wouldn't have a future, we wouldn't have a life worth living. Civilization would collapse, which is interestingly what's happening right now. You pious people, God bless you, make dua for me. I respect it, mashallah. It's a Sunday night on vacation, and you're in the masjid, listening to me talk. Simultaneously in exercise and piety and in sabr. This is not even a drop in the bucket compared to the Muslim population. There is probably more halal restaurants on this one road for like a mile than there are individuals in this majlis. Each restaurant is filled with 70 people who are not interested in hearing what Mawlvi Sahib has to say. And then after that, that's the Muslim community. Those are the guys going to Jannah. What about the rest of them? There's a lot of people. We're not even a drop in the bucket. How do they mate? Well, statistically, it's somewhat similar to the way that the gorilla mates. You have an app. You swipe right, you swipe left. Right? Why are you laughing? Huh? You know what I'm talking about? How do you know? I remember one time I was translating for Mufti Palanpuri's bayan. Mufti Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala exalt his rank amongst the awliya. Such a catastrophic loss for me as a human being just to know that he's not here anymore. So it was really awkward to translate for his bayan. I'll be honest with you. So one time he was talking about pictures, the tahrim, the prohibition of pictures. And one of the wisdoms being that it's like one of the primary vehicles for the proliferation of indecency, of fawahish, right? So he mentioned this one sentence. He goes, pata nahi aajkal, and he talks about all these fawahish, and then he goes, aajkal to puri ki puri plastic ki aurat bhi mil jati hai. And I'm like, oh my God, did Mufti Palanpuri just say that? And then I just translated it, and there was an awkward pause in the majlis because I'm listening, through the earpiece. And he goes, kya, tumhe nahi pata tha? Right? Don't have your head in the sand. These things exist in life. Someone might actually ask the question when Maulana Sahib is not watching, well, what's wrong with that? What if I'm happy? We're not harming anybody. What's wrong with it? I'll tell you what's wrong with it, okay? It's very simple. It's not difficult to understand. So what happens is statistically in that, 80% of the women will match with like 10% of the men, 15% of the men. Which is what? If you have a nice picture, you look good, your hair's done good. You may not have an education or a job. You may live in your mother's basement and work out all day, and you're ripped. You look good. Like the alpha looks, right? You look good. That's really all you have, because how much can you tell about somebody from like a one-page profile? They may have like some funny jokes or catch lines or whatever in the profile, but half of them are probably copy-pasted anyway. The photo is probably air-touched. They look good. Okay, they look pretty. What is it? The alpha takes the harem, and the betas are left to fight over the like bottom 15% of women that those guys are not going to take. This is the future of the human race. If people are mating like gorillas, don't expect, if they're mating like chimpanzees, if they're mating like orangutans, don't be surprised if the next generation, people actually start to behave like that. This is one of the prophecies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about human society near the end of time, that you will have the children of zina, bastard children who are filled with rage. Now obviously we don't, I should, walk that back. The word bastard children is somewhat of a rhetorically provocative choice. It doesn't mean that if your parents weren't married when you were conceived that it's any sin of yours. I want to get that clear. Many of the companions were not radiyallahu anhum, and they were the best of the creation after the Anbiya alayhim salatu wasalam. They were not conceived in a halal way. However, this doesn't allow a person to ignore the fact that it's not ideal to not grow up with a proper father, not grow up with a proper mother. The resentment, the difficulties, the obstacles you have to go through when you live that life, it doesn't help a person get closer to the path of righteousness. Even if some people, inside of themselves, they have so much strength and they have so much himmah and they have so much control that they can overcome and surmount their challenges. Most people don't. Most people give in to them. They cave in. So the issue is this, is that if we want to keep and we want to produce further generations of degenerates, by all means, choose a mate that has all the properties of degeneracy. That's how that works. With males, coming back to the issue of being men and surviving, with males, you are not guaranteed survival. With women, with females, somebody or another will take you. They may not be ideal, you may not be happy, but it's not all that difficult when things like boil down to the lowest common denominator to find a mate. We're talking not about Islam and Sharia here. We're talking about what? How to be an animal. Someone will take you. Someone will take you. With males, there's no guarantee of any of that. With males, you have to prove your ability to survive so that you're worthy to go to the next generation, to move your case forward, to move your life forward. Do you understand that? We shelter our boys. This is 100% disservice to our sons. 100% disservice to our sons. 300 years ago when we lived in the Mughal Empire and actually were justified in eating mithai with silver foil on it and all that stuff, right? Inshallah, there was some logic to it. Why? I can explain that in a separate talk, but we have deadlines to meet. Now it makes 100% no sense. Now our back is to the wall, like those who were present for yesterday's talk. We're like the livestock in somebody else's slaughterhouse, right? You do no service whatsoever to any of your children, but in particular to your boys by babying them. Why? Because there is no guarantee you will survive, you'll make it forward. Society has ways of dragging males underneath the bus. I mean, this is one of the fun things, right? Like the elders, because English may not be their first language, and because they grew up in very, very difficult situations, they don't express themselves to other people, and even if they do, they're not understood by the younger generation. The reason they don't express themselves is because their childhood and upbringing was so difficult, some of them, that really there's no point in telling people about your pain because really nobody cares. My father tells me about growing up in Pakistan after partition. He said, until I was like 13, 15, something like that, it was not uncommon to see people who suffered so much catastrophic loss from the terror of partition that you would just see like random people in the street crying. It was just a normal part of life. Because you would see someone who lost their mind because of the difficulty they went through. It was just a normal part of life. So like, you're gonna be like, oh man, like I failed classes and life is really hard. And someone else is like, yeah, you know, an antagonistic mushrik like killed like all of my sisters in front of my eyes and like killed my father. Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna lose that one, right? So nobody cares. No one cares. So they don't express these things, they don't share them with one another. But we have to have this understanding. You're going to survive. Your father is not going to survive on your behalf. Your brother is not going to survive on your behalf. Maulana Sahib is not going to survive. No one is going to survive on your behalf. You have to keep your physical fitness. You have to keep your health. They're two different things, right? Health is like being alive, and physical fitness is like actually your strength. The old system of finding a mate, we're talking about animals, right? The old system of finding a mate amongst our qawm, for those of us who are from the Indian subcontinent and other large swaths of the Muslim world, was what? When you become baligh, you're going to end up marrying a cousin. And whether you get along or not, you're going to live in an extended family, so you don't have to see each other like for all that much of the day. And if you get pissed off and say something to her, her relatives are your relatives, so it kind of like comes into equilibrium. And she gets pissed off and says something to you, again, equilibrium will like press it all out. And that's why you're going to stay married forever, and you're going to live in your Abba's house, and when he dies, it's going to become your house. This is like, by and large, the way things work, or something similar to that, with minor changes, minor differences. A wonderful exemption to this rule is our Pathan brethren, amongst whom they have a very beautiful custom. I remember when I was in madrasa in Pakistan, I would see these like 8-year-old, 10-year-old kids from Balochistan and from the what they call now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the border provinces and the hinterlands, some of them, doing hifz in Lahore. So I was like, I would ask, like they'd have like a cousin or a brother or something. Like some of those kids didn't even learn Urdu yet. They just knew Pashto, and I don't speak Pashto, so I would ask them, like, don't you guys have like madaris where you can do hifz in your areas? They're like, yes, we do. However, in our culture, for a boy to live under the love and care and softness of his mother after like the age of 8 or 10 is considered to be really bad amongst us, because he'll never learn how to be a man. He'll never learn how to be a man. And so you'll see that their children, they will, like literally, their eyes are like the eyes of a wolf. They'll talk to you like a man. They're kids, chotu, like this big. They'll talk to you like a man. You'll see them running shops. You'll see that. I remember one of the funniest things I remember from madrasa, that one time one of those kids came up to me and says, how can we pray wrong? And like, and he's saying to me in Pashto, he's like, how can we pray wrong? How come you don't pray right? This is how you pray. You don't pray like this. And so the older Pashto speaking kids were like having a fun time. They were laughing, and they let him kind of like do this for a little while for their own entertainment. Then they said to him, oh, it's a different madhab. And like, how does an 8-year-old kid from like Bajor agency like know what madhab? It's, the whole thing is fun, but the thing is like they have courage. They know they have to take care of themselves. They know they have to stand up on their own 2 feet, and they know they have to learn things. They have to be in situations where things are not going to go like they're going to go. And of course, every culture has certain customs that are optimal and suboptimal. The wise person is the one who takes the good things from a qawm and leaves the things that don't work. But the point is that this particular custom, it helps children to know that they have to survive. Boys have to learn how to be a man very quickly. They have to learn how to survive. Because if you cannot pay the bills, your wife is not going to listen to you. She's not going to look at you like a man. It's a problem, because if your wife doesn't look at you like a man, are you going to win that animal contest to have children and to propagate your nasl to the next generation? Absolutely not. This is, again, these things are so awkward to discuss. Why? Because people have gone so far from the fitrah, right? It says in the Quran, one of the jobs of shaitan is what is halak al-harth wal nasl. to make people destroy their own agriculture and their own lineage. Now people think of children as a burden. It's like really a great shaitanic victory for them. Someone's like, so who cares if I don't have kids? Okay, coming back to the theme of you have to like teach a person how to be an animal. You have to, right? Go read Bible. Don't believe me, right? Maulvi Sahib, he spouts off all of these things. God knows this guy, you know, he probably came out of a cave, and when this bayan is done, he'll go back into the cave. Okay, chalo theek hai yaar. Go read in a biology book, what are the signs of something being alive? One of the signs of something being alive is what? Is that it tries to procreate. This is one of the sorriest and saddest things that I've seen, that the culture is maladjusted. People don't know what the point of being alive is. They don't know what the point of having a family is. They follow all of these weird customs that make sense. I don't want to say they don't make any sense, because people say, is this Islam or is this culture? Culture is bad, why just follow Islam? No, brothers and sisters. The culture of our forefathers was adjusted for their time and their place. They weren't stupid people. They built empire, they built civilization, they built things that we're not able to build. Even the masjid is just a poor imitation of the things that they built. It's a good because we pray and stuff, but it's a poor imitation. The quality with which they made things, with which they left behind, the structures that they left behind. Go to the Badshahi Masjid in Lahore. The quality is something that's day and night difference. We're just trying to struggle to fill their boots. The way you're going to fill their boots is by understanding how they thought. It's not by doing exactly the same things that they did. Because the day you have the throne and the day that you lose the throne, you're going to have to do different things. But the maqsad is all the same every day. The maqsad is all the same every day. Which if you have a head on your shoulders, the maqsad is that you should do those things that Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam commanded in order to what? In order to have a good day the day that you meet Him. You're not going to be able to do that without being a good human being, and you're not going to be a good human being without being a functional animal, right? So this is the one point, is that you have a mandate for survival. Nobody can kill you. Even your parents, they don't have the right to kill you. What do I mean by that? The qatl khata, right? Manslaughter. Not like premeditated homicide, but manslaughter. There's no qisas in it. You don't retaliate against a person. If they do something stupid and accidentally kill you, then they pay restitution or they can be forgiven, but you can't kill them for it because they didn't mean to kill you. So what is the diya? What is the, and even if it's premeditated homicide, the family has the right to take the diya, the blood wit, the financial payment in lieu of retaliation, in lieu of killing a person, right? So what's the diya? What's the blood wit of a free Muslim? Where's our Maulana Hazrat? Of course, Hazrat Maulana knows before I was born for decades, so like I feel ashamed mentioning these things. But where's the younger guys? Anyone want to raise your hand? What is the diya of the maximum diya of a free Muslim when you kill them? 100 camels. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam set the limit at 100 camels, which is not like a small amount of money. It's 6 figures in today's money. It's not going to be more than that though. Why? Because they needed a way to end the blood feuds of Jahiliyyah so that people can get on with their lives after something tragic happens, because tragic things do happen and you can't control it 100%, right? So we have a concept in the Sharia, which is what? We have a concept in the Sharia which is that there's blood wit for injuries that are done unintentionally, that are less than murder, or that are less than death. So for example, if a person does something so grievous and so severe that they, for example, cause a person to live a life that's completely dysfunctional by normal standards afterward, like cut off both hands, then they actually have to give the full diya, they have to give the full blood wit to the victim. If you cut off one finger, it's how much? 1/10 of the blood wit. 2, it's 1/5. 3, it's 3/10, etc. You get the picture, right? Where am I going with this? When I say you have to survive, no one will survive on your behalf. It gets to the point where I see men coming to me and they say, like I say, hey, how come you haven't gone to Hajj? Begum nahi jane deti. My wife doesn't allow me. How come you're like 38 years old? How come you didn't get married yet? Ami ijazat nahi deti. What? What? Are you the bride or are you the groom? What's going on here? Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying don't listen to your parents. That's, of course, like that's not what the deen teaches at all. But you've reached this like age where half of your life or more is gone. And when somebody asks you that maqsad of the deen, that is half of your deen, why you don't fulfill it? And you said, my mother doesn't let me. My father doesn't let me. Where does that come from? What does that even mean? Do you know what the diya is to cause an injury to another man because of which they lose their genitalia? It's a full blood whip. This is a type of murder that we do to our own children because we're enslaving them to customs or to the sensitivity of irrational people. Again, I'm not saying all of your parents are irrational. Most of your parents actually will give you very good advice. But the point is, you have to survive. No one else will survive on your behalf. And there's ways to get to that. Ow, right? Hurts, right? There's ways to get there. More than one. If you grew up and you didn't, how old are you right now? 16, right? If you don't do good at school, if you don't figure out a trade, if you don't know what you want to do with your life, what's going to end up happening? You'll be 26 years old. I'll be like, are you married yet? You'll be like, "Ami abbu ne shaadi karne dete." My parents don't allow me. I go, well, you don't really need their permission. Obviously, you shouldn't do it in a, like to upset them or spite them. Like if your mother like says, oh, this girl is really good and she really is good, like just marry her. Why do you have to like upset her by marrying someone else who's exactly the same as, that's different. But what happens? They don't let me get married. I'm like, well, you don't need your, you don't even, as a male, you don't need their permission, right? You don't need their permission as a male. Then you're going to say, yeah, but like, Abu won't give me the money to get married. That's not Abu's fault, that's your fault, that's your problem. Do you understand what I'm saying? As a man, the Sharia does not oblige your fathers to spend a dime on you after you become baligh. Part of the problem is what? We don't train our sons to understand that and be ready for that at that time. It's a shame. It's a shame to ask your father for money after you've become a man. Really, after the age of 10, you should stop asking your father for money. If you're a girl, it's different. If you're a man, it's a shame. You don't ask your father for things. Go do work yourself. Say, I can't get a job. Ask your father, what can I do for you? How much will you pay me? I'll work in the house. Don't ask for things. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the giving hand is better than the receiving hand. Don't be the receiving hand. Of course, the children may not know about this, although nowadays they know all of these things. But even like we don't want to talk about what does it mean to be a male and to be a female. The archetype of a male is a person who gives with ihsan, and the archetype of a female is the person who receives with ihsan. So much so that the actual act of making love is the male giving with ihsan. Not to be blunt or to be like vulgar, but you have to understand form follows function. There's a philosophy through these things that pervades all things, from the spiritual to the physical and everything in between. That in the act of making love, the male is supposed to give with ihsan, and the female is supposed to receive with ihsan. Right? It's not his job, it's your job to survive. What did I say? I just say survival, is it his job or your job? It's your job. Why are you playing video? I don't know you, right? You're probably at home doing hifs and like, working hard and studying and things like that. But I'm just saying, like, why are boys at home watching TV, playing video games? Why are they watching sports matches? Why are they watching football? American or the other one? Both, either of them. If the ball is so important, why did you kick it in the first place? You kick a ball and run after it. This is something dogs do. It's true, you don't know what to do except for to laugh, but literally, there's a whole history, there's a tariq behind this. From the time of ancient Rome, entire aqwam have been enslaved by these things. Why? Because the men at the top, they want to be the alpha, and there's other ways of winning the competition of beating down the betas than just fighting. You understand? If you can make a fool out of all of them and get them to drop out of the competition, it makes your work all the easier if you want to be an alpha, right? So get people to be entertained by all of these things. Get people to waste their time with all of these things. If you're the one who's falling for that trap, after being part of the ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and knowing better, being told all of this is going to happen, whose fault is it? Is it somebody else's or is it yours? So like I said, that those boys, like from the time of 10, they used to work, they used to take responsibility, they used to stop being babied. They used to man up. If you need to get married, you're going to need to get married. You may not feel it right now, but trust me, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks the day it does. It's going to hit you. It's going to hit all of you. I'm so sorry. I wish it wasn't true. It will hit you like a ton of bricks one day. Start saving money for a mahr. Start figuring out how much does it cost to get an apartment. If you cannot afford to live in Toronto, go live in Manitoba. But be a man. I was very shocked, actually. I gave a bayan for the sisters earlier in the day, like behind the penalty box, of course, right? But like, the sisters had power play. I was in the box. So, Canada's hockey, right? So I gave bayan. I was surprised by how many sisters asked a question. Is it right for, for the husband to demand that the wife pays half of the mortgage? I'm like, I don't know your guys' issues. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to comment because you guys know what it's like to be here better than me, right? But dude, if that's the case, right, and you think your wife is going to respect you after that, it's better to live like a man with your dignity and pay for things and to give with ihsan rather than to like screw all of these things up and then afterward you complain, your wife complains that we're not happy. There's an idea, and I want to close with this because I actually went over my time and that's not a good thing. I apologize. I want to close with this, which is there is an idea that a person has to make those difficult decisions that they have to make in life if their intention from day one is I'm going to do things the right way. That never comes easy. It will always have a cost involved with it. If it's worth having, it's worth working for, it's worth sacrificing for. If it's not worth working for, it's not worth sacrificing for, it's not worth having. And someone says, even then, Shaykh, it's like such a difficult thing. That's why part of your fitness and your survival has to do with your ta'alluq with Allah Ta'ala. You're not alone. You're not alone. One day your Abba will fail you. Your father will fail you. Your brothers will fail you. The masjid will fail you. It's probably already failed you, right? The Muslim community will fail you. Everyone will fail you, right? Who's the only one who will never fail you? إذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب نجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعاني فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون. Let them call upon me and let them believe in me. If my slaves ask you about me, I'm near at hand. I answer the caller who calls upon me when he calls upon me. So this is another reason to cut out all of the other things. You know, whether they're haram or not, TikTok and Facebook, or this other shaykh said it's not haram. Okay, chalo theek hai yaar, chalta hai, sab chalta hai, right? But you don't have time for any of those things. You have to get in shape, you have to save money, you have to learn how to make a living, you have to, learn how to physically defend yourself so you don't get jumped in Scarborough and your wallet is taken, so you have the money for mahr to get married and it's all gone in a day, right? And it's difficult, it's a scary world out there. We saw how scary it was. People would call me parishan, they're like, Shaykh, I don't know what to do. I'm scared of this COVID vaccine. It might actually kill me. You can laugh afterward. You don't know. Maybe 20 years down the road, all of us are going to suffer. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I'm just saying it's possible, right? People were scared. They're like, but like so I don't want to take it. But if I don't take it, I'm not going to get a job. I'm not going to like be allowed back to work, and I'm going to lose my job, and then I can't pay the rent. What do? I told them, you think this is like a unique problem that we have? Imagine our brothers and sisters around the world, what difficulties they go through. Imagine for the entire history of mankind. Even the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam had times in their life that they couldn't walk down the street without being physically assaulted. Some of them were martyred. The righteous people, because they spoke the haqq, they had to give their life. مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ Allah yajazika khairan. And from amongst them, there's the one who gave their life for it. And from amongst them, they're the ones who are waiting. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. It's scary. All of these things are scary. They're not easy. It was hard for me. It's traumatizing for me to do what I did so far, and there's so much more for me to do. So much more that I'm scared about. I have 3 daughters, so much more that I'm scared about in the future. You have to, La ilaha illallah. You have to, Allah, Allah. Right? فَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا. You have to, اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. You have to do it. كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. That Allah Ta'ala sends the blessing back on you 10 times. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam returns the salat to you. This is what? This is called madad. Allah Ta'ala gives madad to the people who call upon Him. We have some people, all they say, Ya Rasulullah madad. All they say, Ya Abdul Qadir Jailani madad, whatever. Like, I'm not talking about the hukum of any of that. I didn't say that it's shirk, did I? No, I just said they say those things. The person who knows what madad is, the person who does something for the sake of Allah and tries their best, and they get to a point in their life where they're completely out of their league. They're completely 100% down and out. Every plan that they made ran out. They tried their hardest, and now all their efforts are done. That's the moment when you realize what the power of Iman is. That's the moment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifts you. حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Once you're at your wit's end, and then Allah ta'ala lifts you, then you feel the power of what La ilaha illallah is. You start that journey, right? So this is another thing that you have to do in order to survive. This Quran you're reading, this is not just something so that you have a khatam party and then your dad gets off your back or whatever. It's real. It carried our forefathers to the continents, to the afaq, to the horizons, and it made them the men that they were. It will also get you and me through our shadi, inshallah. Allah Ta'ala help us, inshallah, and survive the shadi afterward once we get it. Allah Ta'ala help us all. Allah Ta'ala make us men. Allah Ta'ala crown us with the taj of iman and with manhood, and make it easy for us to survive. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala rasulih Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.